Centuries before European ships ever crossed the Indian Ocean, Somali merchants had already built a vast maritime network. It connected Africa, Arabia, India, and even China. This isn't just folklore or a tall tale, it's backed by solid archaeological and historical evidence. This globalized trade existed long before the term globalization was even a concept. Along the Somali coast, city ports like Opone, now known as Opone, Mosylon, which is modern-day Bosaso, and Mundus, or Hais, weren't just sleepy coastal villages. They were bustling international trade stations. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of today's major shipping hubs. We know this because sources from ancient Greece, Rome, and the Arab world all documented them. And they didn't describe them as minor stops on the way to somewhere else. They were key hubs, central to the entire Indian Ocean trade system. So, what was the secret to their success? How did they manage to dominate this vast oceanic space for so long? It wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of strategic advantages and raw skill. First, geography. They were perfectly positioned at the gateway between the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. Any ship wanting to move between Europe, the Middle East, and Asia had to pass them. They controlled the crossroads. Second, they were master shipbuilders. They developed unique ocean-worthy vessels like the Bedouin. These weren't small, flimsy boats. The Bedouin featured stitched hulls, a technique where planks were literally sewn together with core rope, making the ship incredibly flexible and resilient in rough seas. They were equipped with lateen sails, triangular sails that were perfect for catching and maneuvering in the powerful monsoon winds. This design was an ingenious adaptation to their environment. Third, they had an incredible understanding of the market. They knew what goods were in high demand and where to get them. This wasn't just about selling what they had, it was about building a complex supply chain, sourcing products from deep within the African interior and distributing them across the known world. They were savvy entrepreneurs and strategists. And finally, their navigation skills were second to none. These were not guesswork journeys. Somali sailors had a deep, institutional knowledge of the monsoon cycles. They used rudimentary forms of celestial navigation, using the stars to guide them across thousands of miles of open water. They understood seasonal trade patterns, knowing the best time to arrive in India or Arabia to sell their goods and buy others. Now, let's talk about what they were actually trading. This was big business. Their primary exports were high-value luxury goods. Frankincense and myrrh, aromatic resins harvested from trees in the Horn of Africa, were in massive demand. They were shipped to temples and wealthy homes across the Roman and Greek worlds for religious ceremonies and as perfumes. They also traded ivory and gold sourced from the African interior, which were highly prized in the Near East and India. And they exported other animal products, like rhinoceros horns and tortoise shells, which were used for medicinal purposes and to create manufactured luxury items. But it wasn't a one-way street. They were also major importers. They brought in silks from as far away as China, a journey that required multiple intermediaries and a sophisticated understanding of transcontinental trade routes. And they brought in glassware, pottery, and weaponry from the Middle East. It's important to understand this wasn't some romantic, adventurous quest. This was a calculated, commercial strategy designed to generate wealth and influence. How do we know all of this with such certainty? The evidence is extensive. We have written sources like the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. This is a Greco-Roman mariner's guide from the 1st century CE, basically an ancient lonely planet for traders. It openly describes the Somali ports as being wealthy, organized, and governed by their own rulers. It lists the specific goods traded at each port. Then there's the archaeology. Excavations at sites like Opone and Hais have unearthed physical proof. Archaeologists have found Roman pottery, Parthian glassware, and Indian beads. confirming direct and indirect long-distance exchange. These artifacts tell a clear story of a connected, cosmopolitan world. This network wasn't accidental. It was deliberately built and maintained over centuries. So if this network was so powerful and sophisticated, what happened to it? It's crucial to understand that its decline wasn't a sudden collapse. And it definitely wasn't because the Somalis were somehow primitive or passive. That's a lazy and incorrect narrative. The system simply evolved and lost its dominance due to a series of external pressures. The expansion of later empires, like the Aksamites and later the Arabs and Persians, created new competition and disrupted established routes. Global trade patterns began to shift, moving away from the old routes and toward new centers of power. Competition within the Red Sea itself intensified, squeezing the profit margins that the Somali ports had long enjoyed. They didn't just disappear, the world changed around them. There is more than enough evidence to firmly reject the old, colonial-era narrative that they were simply outcompeted by more advanced powers. The reality is far more complex and interesting. And the legacy of this incredible maritime history is not dead. If you go to the Somali coast today, you can still see modern versions of traditional vessels being sailed by local communities. The shipbuilding techniques have evolved, but the cultural memory, the deep connection to the sea, is still very much alive. It's a tradition that has been passed down through countless generations. If this story challenges the simplified, often watered-down version of African history you might have learned in school, then consider subscribing to the channel. We'll be diving deeper into African navigation, pre-colonial trade networks, and the hard evidence that rewrites our understanding of the past. We're all about history, not myths. Thanks for watching.